what is the difference between left and right brain selling?
Left is logic, LL. That's an easy way to remember it. Right brain is emotion. But it's the issue of emotion versus logic, and it works this way. You want to do right brain selling. You want to do emotional selling. And the reason you want to do emotional selling is because the emotion part of the brain, and which I'm showing the right brain. Okay, make sure I'm pointing to the right. The emotion side of the brain is also the decision side of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize this. If you throw too much logic at somebody, it actually turns off the emotion center of their brain, and it actually makes it harder to sell.
The following is my conversation with James Bond. James is one of America's leading behavioral management and business marketing specialists and is the author of the multi-award-winning book, Brain Glue: How to Sell Easier by Making Your Ideas Sticky. He is a past workshop chairman and sold-out workshop leader for the resource partner of the U.S. Small Business Administration and has been a featured guest speaker at 3 Southern California universities and ran one of Southern California's leading behavioral management firms. In this episode, we discussed why the story is more important than the product, how to make your message so good that people can't help but buy your product, and how he helped the legendary investor Warren Buffett. Enjoy our conversation. James Bond, thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me. Really excited. Love your podcast.
To have you. Yep, and we were just talking off air a little bit. I feel like I've made it as a podcaster when I have the James Bond on my podcast, so today feels like a momentous day.
Well, I think my parents had a sense of humor. I was born after the books, but before the movies. And so I remember as the movies started coming out, it became everyone was like, "Hey, James Bond!" So I go, okay. Now it's fun, except I go into a room with 200 people. I do coaching for the Small Business Administration. I'll have 200 people or 300 people. Everyone knows my name, and I'm like, I have to remember everybody's name. Daniel Blumin says, "Oh yeah, we're Blumin good." So that works well. But James Bond somehow I think that's what got me into Brain Glue, which we're going to talk about, by the way. It's because I was just floored by James Bond. James Bond, that's your name? It's like, yeah. People hang up on me. Yeah, right. Whatever. Click.
Every time you go into a training, you should dress like James Bond and kind of James Bond. So maybe food for thought for later, but really, really fun around that, and happy your parents had a fun sense of humor and were able to kind of predict the movie star. But a little bit about you. You are kind of this master of persuasion, have figured out a lot of secrets that might be holding a lot of companies back when it comes to sales. But before I get into all that, from all your experience, do you think that we as consumers buy products or we buy stories?
We buy stories. We buy things that connect with us and resonate with us. And that's one of the things I discovered. I didn't know this early on. I started, saving. This is over 35 years that I've learned this. I started compiling things without realizing how it all fit together. But no, we're story people. And this is stories stick to the brain. But it's tools also. And it's like Jack and Jill went up the
hill.
Okay. I bet everybody who's on the podcast knows that word, okay? Because we might have heard it that phrase 10, 20, maybe for me, 50, 60 years ago. I'm old. Mm-hmm. And yet we remember it like it was yesterday. So there are certain things, stories fit in our brain because it gives us visuals that we can relate to, okay? And that's, it triggers the emotion centers of the brain. It's the same part of the brain where decisions actually happen. That's why in business, they try to focus people on storytelling. But in life too, I know Jack Canfield, he loved my book, by the way, which is really exciting. There's a whole story there. But, he's a storyteller. And, and it's telling stories resonates more with people than if you just say, do this or do that. Say, let me tell you about this thing that happened to me, blah, blah, blah. You start telling a story and people can really relate to it, and it has a tremendous impact, but it also affects the emotion part of the brain where decisions are made. People don't realize that. You throw too many numbers at a person. I work with finance companies and they live on numbers. And so they sit and they start telling people, oh, you'll make 10% on this and everything else. And I was with a finance company and these guys were talking to this musician. I don't want to say who it is, but he's really famous. And they're talking to him about this finance thing they want him to invest in, as well as other things that he's already invested in. And they're throwing numbers at him. You'll make 14% on this and then 12% and all that stuff. And I could see the look of he had he had a look on his face of
What are these
like,
guys talking about?
okay, whatever. They have forgotten that guys like that probably hated math in school, and you're throwing math at them. And so I turned to him and I said, well, just so you understand, um, John Lennon, before he died, invested in this type of thing. And that's part of why when he died, he was able to have so much money that he could pass on to, his survivors. And he went, John Lennon did it? You sign me up. So the guy was sitting and going like, as they were throwing numbers at him, nothing, it wasn't resonating. But as soon as I told him the story and talked about John Lennon, which is true, he did do this, suddenly it resonated with them. So yes, storytelling works.
Do you think part of that, to one of the things that you just said, it's kind of a figurative trick. If you're able to say something that, pun intended, sticks to someone's brain, like, Jack and Jill went up the hill, or kind of, $5 foot long, it just resonates with people a little more than just these long sales pitches.
Absolutely. People don't understand. I mean, and it resonates on all levels. We like it because it helps you make money. Okay. So you can make a lot more money. Okay. But I mean, if the glove doesn't fit, you have to acquit.
Hmm.
Okay. Johnny Cochran got O.J. Simpson off from an almost certain guilty verdict in a murder trial. He said, I mean, obviously O.J. was, showing that he was having trouble putting the glove on. Okay. But he's an actor. Remember that.
Yeah.
Okay. But two of the jurors were asked after the trial by a journalist, and one of them was responding while the other one was nodding her head in agreement. And the journalist said, with all that evidence against OJ, why'd you find him not guilty? And she confidently said, we knew if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. The glove didn't fit. We had to acquit. I would have said, you have to love how he faked the glove. If I was the other attorney, you have to love how he faked the glove. And then when they go into the jury room, one person would say, well, if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. Oh, come on. If you have to love how he faked the glove, you at least have two rhymes fighting with each other.
Yep. That's a funny line there, and maybe something they could have used in the trial, but it's really interesting to see how these small literary tricks, especially when it comes to marketing and advertising, really play such an emotional role. So really interesting and kind of creative note on there. On a similar note, when a company advertises, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot with a lot of the people that you've worked with, do you think the story or the targeting is more important?
Both.
Equally as
The
important, or
stories.
one is more important than the other?
Well, who you're targeting is very important. Let's start there, okay?
Mhm.
Um, I was working with a pet supplement company. I don't want to say the name because we sort of had a lawsuit because we made millions of dollars and we had a fight. Okay.
Happens.
Hmm?
It happens.
Yeah, I know it does. It was just really, yeah. People change. Not all people, but many people change when they get rich.
Hmm.
And so I took them from 900,000 to $11 million of sales,
Hmm.
and it's because we changed who we were targeting. We were targeting, we had a fantastic pet supplement that helped dogs get better and all that stuff, even from illnesses. And it was developed with the help of veterinarians.
Hmm.
And so the owner of the company was selling to veterinarians. Well, veterinarians, if we have something that's going to heal a dog's kidney disease for $100 a year, if you're a vet, you make like $2,000, $1,000 to $2,000. Why would you go for $100 when you can make the $1,000 or $2,000? Now, I always thought vets care about animals, and they do,
Hmm.
but they also, want to pay their bills. And so, as hard as he tried, he was able to get it up to about $900,000 a year. We discovered that breeders, $100 a year, a dog lives 10 years, that's $1,000. The top breeders who have legitimate breeders, not the puppy mills, they would sell a dog and make about $1,000.
Hmm.
If they include our product and get them to start buying this pet supplement, they just doubled their profit. They just went from $1,000 to $2,000 because they get $100 $100 a year times 10 years. And suddenly, we started explaining to them, you do this, and you're going to double the amount of money you make for a dog. Plus, you're going to keep the dogs healthy.
Hmm.
And they went, oh wow! And some of them put it in a guarantee. They created a health guarantee with a lawyer and all that stuff. And
Hmm.
we asked, could we have a copy of the health guarantee so we could share with other breeders? And he said, absolutely. We started sharing with other breeders, and sales skyrocketed from 900,000 to 11 million in sale because of who we were targeting. And so, yeah, who you're targeting. If you're targeting the wrong person, sometimes you target somebody who's really hard to sell to.
Hmm.
Can you find somebody who's a little easier to sell to? Maybe you make a little less money, but you can get 10 times the number of people saying yes. So to me, it's always who are you targeting first? And I'll give you an example with this, okay? It's a
Mhm.
brain glue thing, but so I work with this lady, Robin Thompson, who's in Detroit. She's actually on TV in Detroit, on
Mhm.
ABC television as a finance coach for all the people out there, all the audience, okay? And she created this finance program for women who make over $100,000 a year, and are frustrated because, or embarrassed because they look at their savings and they realize, wow, we don't have much in our savings. You know, for all the money I have almost no money in my savings. So we went through this, and in the discussions, we discovered, she said that most of the people that I sell to are married and have a spouse.
Mhm.
Okay. And so she sells this program for, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000, something like that. It's a really powerful program. And it helps them build the amount of money they have in their savings account. But as I was talking with her and we're interacting, she's telling me one of the biggest problems I have is that, to get a woman to sign up for my program, she still has to sell her husband or girlfriend if it's a gay couple, whatever else it is, but her spouse. And so we came up with the phrase, I'm tired of giving our money away.
Mhm.
Okay. So now we're giving them a phrase to say to their spouse, you know? So, and we would say, a lot of people have, a spouse that you have to talk to. So what they say is, I'm tired of giving our money away. That's why I signed up for this program. And
Mhm.
suddenly sales exploded because we defined who we're targeting, who she's targeting, and then we created a pitch for that person. Because it's one of the things I discovered is sometimes, you're creating a pitch for somebody, but they have to convince somebody else, either somebody in work or a parent or a child or whatever else it is. And so the easier you can make it for them to communicate, to trigger something with the person they have to sell to, the easier it is to make money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's interesting. So what you're saying is we basically have to really understand our target, or kind of as a company to really understand your target. And once you understand who your target is, initially I guess she thought that her target was just selling to kind of high income earning women, but really it was, high income earning women in a relationship. So when you really understand your targeting, that's when you can really, you know, skyrocket your sales.
And just about this, so we do avatar. Okay, like what's the avatar? What's the who's? Let's define who we're selling to. One of the biggest mistakes people make is they forget something. It's not just who you're targeting, but when.
Hmm.
From this standpoint, so my mom, uh, you know, you want to understand, like, what's the moment when somebody's ready to buy? Let's pick a car for a second before I give my mom's story. Okay, so if you're going to buy a car, when are you going to buy a car? Maybe because you're the only guy at work who has an old car, and suddenly a new one of your neighbors or one of your buddies just bought a brand new car, and he's excited.
Hmm.
So, and you're embarrassed because you're still driving an old car, but he just got this brand new, like, really cool car. Okay, so now you can create your advertising campaign saying, "Are you tired because all your neighbors have great cars, or all your coworkers have great cars except you? We'll make it easy for you. Check this out." Okay, now your pitch changes. So my mom was older; she passed away a couple of years ago, but caregiving organizations marketed to me because they figured, I'm an ideal person because I've got an elderly mom. She's single, her husband died, and all that stuff. But I could care less about caregivers until
Hmm.
my mom had a stroke. And suddenly, when my mom had a stroke, I became freaked out. Like, we have to get a caregiver. How do we know a good caregiver from a bad caregiver? How much do they cost? Um, are there different caregivers for people that have a stroke versus other ones? I mean, I'm ready. If you can answer my questions, I'm ready to buy.
Hmm.
And so I work with a caregiving company. We built a campaign around that and saying, do you have a family? Do you have a mom or dad who had a stroke? If you did, you want to understand that, stroke caregivers are more, understand things differently than other caregivers, blah, blah, blah. Then it's suddenly their sales like skyrocketed because we focused on not just who, but when does somebody become an ideal target?
Got it. So you have to focus more on, well, not more on, but in addition to targeting, focus on timing. So if you can combine the targeting and the timing and some of the brain glue, which we'll get into later, that's what can really skyrocket a company's capabilities.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And it works easier than I thought. It's like, so many people start doing it. Because I coach marketing consultants, by the way. So, so I'll do that all the time. And I'll say, okay, so let's pick some of your clients. Okay. When does somebody become an ideal client? Some guy selling windows, when does somebody become an ideal client? Uh, I see them start, that's interesting,
So
Interesting. That's the essence of how we're selling. If
yeah,
somebody isn't ready to buy, it doesn't matter what you offer them. They're not buying, you know.
for
Hey, you
sure.
want to buy food just after you finish a big meal? Hey, you want to buy some food? No, I'm just
No,
nauseous. Go away.
but if you fasted all day, then people would eat anything. So
Absolutely.
it's interesting. So to switch gears a little bit about here, can I give you a live case study on a topic like this?
Sure.
So, say for example, we'll use my last name here, and say for example, I'm starting a coffee company. Let's call it Blumin's Beans, for example.
Uh-huh.
Right now, I just have a name, Blumin's Beans, and I sell coffee. What can I do to turn my product into a blockbuster coffee company?
Okay, so we are logical. Most people are logical. So instead of turning off the logic, we always start with the logic. Okay? And then we use emotion. Emotion people buy for emotional reasons, not logical. When I was young, I hated selling. My brother was a better salesman than me. Okay, he would sell me better than I would sell me. We had an advertising agency, and it would piss me off. And eventually, family and business doesn't always mix, so we broke up, and I had to learn how to sell. But I went to Zig Ziglar, and Zig Ziglar said he just changed my life. But he said selling is nothing more than a transference of passion. And when he said, like, if you had a movie, you watch a movie and you love this movie, nobody has to teach you how to sell the movie. You go like, oh man, you gotta see this movie, Hidden Figures. It's such a great movie. It's whatever the movie is, okay? And it's easy we know how to sell because we're transferring our passion. But when we're creating ads, what we do is we often think of we focus on the logic side, especially if you're really good at what you're doing. Often you're a logical person. You're figuring out a logical solution to a problem or something. So Bloomin' Beans, okay? What's so great about the beans?
The beans are naturally sourced from, a fair labor country where we pay people equally and we make sure they're of the highest quality coffee beans.
So Blockbuster Bloomin' Beans. It's just you want to make sure that your name has something that resonates with them. And let me give you
Mhm,
an example of. So here's a mom and son who watch Shark Tank. They love a lot of people watch Shark Tank and go like, "Hey, I want to do that. I want to be on Shark Tank, or I want to have make millions of dollars. That sounds really cool." So it's a mom and son in Utah who watched Shark Tank and went like, well, it would be fun if we can create a product and get on Shark Tank and maybe make millions of dollars. That'll be really fun.
mhm,
And so it takes a while sometimes. Just because you say, well, I want to be on it, you still have to come up with the right product.
mhm,
Well, the mom was constipated. And so the doctor told her, you're always naturally constipated. When you're on the toilet, I don't want to get too much into this, okay?
mhm,
But when you're on the toilet, you want to raise your feet above the floor, like 6 to 8 inches off the floor.
mhm,
And she goes, oh, okay. And she tried it and it really worked. It really helped her a lot. And they realized when they talked to other people went, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And so they said, wow, it would be cool if we created a product like that
mhm,
that actually raises your feet a few inches off the floor. It wraps around the toilet so it doesn't look like, it's
mhm.
like really an extra stool. And okay, so that's really great. And so they knew that they had to come up with a good name. And they said, well, it's the toilet stool. My wife said they should have called it the stool stool, but I don't think that's really a good name. Okay.
Yeah, that's
So
that's
you got to have a good name.
not too
But,
funny.
but they went, so it's a toilet stool, but I don't like the word toilet. I don't think that's really a good thing for, good name for people to say. So what are some other words for toilet? Potty. Okay. And I'm kind of squatting as I'm getting on it. What do I call the squatty potty? And bam, it went. It took off like gangbusters because not only was it a good product, because there are a lot of people out there that have good product and they struggle. These guys didn't struggle. They
Mhm,
squatty potty, and they said the squatty potty, and they described what it is, and people went like, "Oh wow, this is really great." And then they started buying it like crazy, and then they had enough money to spend for advertising, so they had fun advertising. They got on Shark Tank, and the rest, as they say, is history. They made over $100 million in just a few years. How about you guys? Okay, how about you and me? I mean, it's
mhm.
just, but that's it's because they came up with a name that resonates also, but also that says what it is you're doing. It gives you a reason why you're buying.
Got it. So it could be thinking back to the coffee example. Say, for example, assuming I had all the proper health testing and it was cleared by several lab tests, if I somehow was able to use maybe a little bit less caffeine and use a few other health supplements, like we see a lot of selling with AG1 and a lot of their commercials, if I could somehow marry that product to my product and I'll somehow use my last name in my podcast, is your business blooming? Like our coffee users, and I'm no salesperson. This is a really shitty sales pitch probably, but if you want to be blooming in the morning, you should get Bloomin's coffee beans or Bloomin's
You
beans.
want your body blooming.
If you want your body blooming, then try Bloomin's beans.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
And I
Something like
wouldn't say just try. I would say you gotta try Blumin's beans because this is gonna get your body blooming like you wouldn't believe. You're gonna have so
that.
much fun blooming your body with real natural coffee. You can have you have to have lots of fun with it too. As you're describing it. You
Got it.
know,
I'll have to keep that in
literally.
mind when I maybe open a coffee company in the
There you
future.
go.
It'll
So
be
there's
that.
this guy Paul Tran. I love this story. Okay, one of the tools we have in Brain Glue is metaphors or analogies. Okay, and I'll give you some examples. But let me give you this example because this
Mhm.
is really gets everybody's attention. Got my attention. So Paul Tran created an electric razor for man's private areas. I don't know why I'm getting into all these, but it really grabs
That's
your
okay.
attention.
It's a practical example.
There you go. So it's an electric razor for man's private areas. Okay. And so he wanted to come up with a name for it. And he was probably sitting with a bunch of friends and they were sitting around and he said, I want a name that people understand what it is, but I don't want to offend people.
Hmm.
So what's a good name? And he said, it's kind of like a lawnmower. Why don't I call it the lawnmower? In fact, he loved it so much he changed the name of his company to Manscape. We're going to landscape a man with the lawnmower.
Hmm.
So I didn't buy one. If I bought one, I wouldn't share it with my friends. Let's start there, okay?
Yeah.
But I can see myself calling, hey, call Daniel. Hey, Daniel, I don't know if you have a wife or girlfriend. Hey, Daniel, guess what I just bought? What? The lawnmower. Oh, wait, you have to mow your lawn? No, it's a shave man's private areas. You
Yeah.
start laughing, and if you have a girlfriend or wife, you say, hey, guess what James just bought? What, a lawnmower? Wait, you have to mow his lawn? No, it's to mow his body.
Hmm.
You start laughing. He's generated hundreds of millions of dollars of sales. So I was in a store. I think it was Bed Bath and Beyond or one of those, something like that with my wife. And they show it says the lawnmower in capital in huge letters with an arrow and it points to the shaver.
Hmm.
An arrow with a picture of the shaver. I'm like, that lawnmower? And I started reading the text, which is what they want you to do. Oh, okay. And immediately it got me hooked on the product. Now I didn't buy it, I don't use it, but you know what I mean? But it grabs your attention. And I think that's one of the problems that we have is there's so many products that we have access to. You go to a grocery store or go to a Bed Bath and Beyond in this case or whatever else. There's a gazillion products in there. How are you going to get people's attention if you're running an ad? There's a gazillion ads out there. How are you going to you want it? It's like when you get out of your house, you drive down the street and you're passing all these homes or apartments, whatever it is. Okay, you're not going to look every day and go, oh, look at his home, look at his home, look at her home. Oh wow, you saw them so many times. You don't even notice them. You get in your car and you drive down the street. But one day you get in your car and you start driving down your street, and two homes down, there's flames coming out of the neighbor's window. Flames coming out of his window. Okay, whoa, is that going to grab your attention? Yeah. Does he know his house is on fire? Should I call 911? Is my house going to burn down? It's boom, it got your attention. And so what brain glue does is it wakes up the brain, so it gets flames coming out of, like the ad for the lawnmower. What was that? I stopped me. It was like flames coming out of the ad or the poster.
Hmm.
That's what you want is you want to make sure that flames coming out of your ad or your product in such a way that people go, whoa, what's that? I mean, I remember I have a TV next to my computer, and I'm sitting and working on a computer, and the TV was on. Normally it isn't, but it was on for whatever reason. And they were talking about Blue Emu, which is a cream that helps you if you have arthritis, you have pain in your joints and stuff. And so I'm not listening to it. And it's Johnny Bench, who's a Hall of Fame baseball player, and he says, "And Blue Emu, it works fast and you won't stink." What did he just say? You won't stink. He got my attention, and from that point forward, I was watching the commercial in detail
Hmm.
because it woke up the brain. Work fast, it works fast, and you won't stink. And so that's one of the most important things we want to do is if you have a really great product, like the Squatty Potty is a good example. They might have had a great product, but if they didn't have a good name, then that you struggle because you're trying to turn people on to this product that's really valuable for you. It could be really great, but it's hard because you're competing against so many ads and products. And we walk across the street and we're reading our phone, we're texting, we're not even
Hmm.
looking at traffic as we cross the street. I mean, that's how we're constantly being bombarded with information. And what we want is we all want to wake up the brain so they go, hey, what? Huh? And you won't stink. What? You know? And so if we can do that, you have a much better chance of making a fortune.
Do you think there are also graphic design kind of factors to consider here? Because sometimes you might, well, I guess the company you're talking about, Manscaped, I don't remember exactly what their logo looks like, but you have something like Nike or, on a personal example, when I'm running this podcast, my logo used to just be kind of the name of the podcast. But recently I changed it to like a B and then having like an arrow just like going up to show that kind of business is going up. So
Yep.
can relate on a personal note, but do you think it's also, people want to visually see what's going on? And in addition to kind of having, that figurative tool that we mentioned earlier, like the squatty potty or $5 footlong, it's also important to have like a visual aspect so people kind of stop and see and wonder what is that?
Not as much as you think. First,
Really?
yes, if you can have a visual, there are visual tools that work all the time. Okay, so I want to say that, and so when you understand some metaphor, or using that as one tool, absolutely it works. Okay, but this is a mistake that we have. Okay, I want to give you this example because this is a common mistake that most people make. Okay, we forget that some people have a gazillion dollars to spend on advertising, and so they run an ad, and we go, "Oh wow, that's a great idea," when it's a crappy idea. And let me give you a perfect example. Remember the Got Milk campaign?
I do, yeah. Oh, there's like the milk mustache.
And the milk two campaigns work together. The Got Milk and the Milk Mustache. Okay, I love the campaigns. Okay, and marketing. Okay, until I read this article, I want to show you this. Okay, um, my kids have, one of my daughters has a Milk Mustache poster with somebody that she loves. Okay,
Mhm.
and I've got the books of Got Milk and Milk Mustache. It has all samples of the
They
ads
used
and
to do
everything
it
else.
with celebrities back in the day. I remember when I was in elementary school, it used to be with kind of high profile individuals.
So here's an article, that says, got milked. After $385 million, sales still continue to decline. Why? They had $385 million. Okay, so they had a lot of money to spend. Okay, it's the
Wow,
Got
that's
Milk.
cool.
It's a milk organization. So, um, because most people who stop drinking milk, everybody used to drink milk all the time, but then because of calcium, so it makes your bones strong and everything else. But you got calcium in spinach. I mean, there's calcium in all these other things, calcium pills. So you don't really need milk for calcium. That's the first thing. The second thing is a lot of people feel like they have lactose intolerance. Where
Hmm.
you drink milk and it sort of makes you nauseous or it makes you feel not so good and everything. Might take a little while. And I don't have lactose intolerance, but because I know about lactose intolerance, I limit how much milk I take, thinking that maybe if I take too much milk, I'll have lactose intolerance. So if you have lactose intolerant, if you're lactose intolerant, and I said got milk, you'd love the campaign, but you're not going to buy more milk. And so the problem, if I was running advertising for them, if I discovered this thing, which I think is true, that there are certain ingredients, a combination of ingredients in milk that you don't get in other products. It has enzymes and stuff that actually make the milk work better to strengthen your bones. If I said that, then you go, that's interesting. I'm giving you a reason why you should buy milk. Okay. And so, I mean, now I come up with a term, brain glue tool, to even make it easier. But the point is, Got Milk campaign, we love the Got Milk campaign, but we forgot that they had so much money to spend that they filled the airwaves and they had famous actors and movie stars and all that stuff doing it. And we thought, wow, that's a fantastic campaign. How about if we do, you have a podcast, Got Podcast, I mean, we copy something that's stupid, but we don't realize it's stupid because we're overwhelmed. And so to me, one of the greatest examples is um, so you're starting a hamburger place, okay? Your family makes really fantastic hamburgers, better than McDonald's and Burger King and all that stuff. You have some money, but not a lot of money. So you can't afford a full restaurant, but you can do a drive-through, okay? So if you could definitely, have in a good location, a drive-through. But you need to come up with a name because that's all you're going to have is the big sign in front. So what are you going to come up with? How about In-N-Out Burgers? Okay, In-N-Out uses something called chiasmus, which I'm going to talk about, which is opposites. Okay, flips. But also In-N-Out means like sex.
Hmm.
I remember driving down the street the first time I saw an In-N-Out burger. We're driving down the street, and In-N-Out burger? What the In-N-Out? Hey, let's check that out. We went through and they make really good hamburgers, by the way. And it's grown like crazy because of the name. Because they recognize, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, they've got like hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on advertising. If I'm starting a restaurant, I don't have that much money. So I'm competing against all the people going to McDonald's. Why don't I open up next to McDonald's or just down the street and I'll call it In-N-Out Burgers? So we're going to McDonald's and they go, In-N-Out Burgers? Whoa. Let's check that out. We always go to McDonald's. Let's check that out. And they grew like crazy. Now they're growing into the Western United States. They started in California. But it's real. It's because they recognize this is what brain glue is so powerful for, is What if you don't have millions? If you have millions of dollars, then you could even have a crappy advertising campaign and probably become successful because you filled a campaign, you have tons of ads and everything else.
Mhm.
But we don't have that, So, you know, so why don't instead let's use a brain tool that makes our product or our ad jump off the page or jump out of the internet or whatever it is, so people go like, whoa, what's that? I got to check that out, and they start reading it and checking it out. Let me give you a perfect example. Okay. This woman who spent zero on Facebook advertising, zero on Facebook
Incredible.
marketing, and she has over 5 million fans. Okay. So wouldn't it be nice? I mean, how many people spend all this money on Facebook advertising, and or you have a Facebook page, and how many fans? You have 5 million fans? I bet you don't.
Yep.
Okay, she has 5 million fans. So she's thinking she's a stay-at-home mom. She has no money to spend on advertising, but she wasn't thinking of that. But she said, I want to create a Facebook page. So I'm a stay-at-home mom. So mommy needs time to herself. Mommy needs a rest because kids are driving her nuts. I know what mommy needs. Mommy needs vodka.
Interesting.
So she created a page, Mommy Needs Vodka. Okay, so I remember I must have a friend that liked it, so they sort of sent a post, one of her posts on a page. A lot of people you have great posts on your page, but you can't get enough people to come to your page. She was the opposite. Okay, she had great posts, and she had a gazillion people come to her page. And so I'm looking at the post and going, oh, that's a pretty good post. Oh, that's pretty funny. Oh, it's by Mommy Needs Vodka. There's flames coming out of the internet. Okay,
Mhm.
Mommy Needs Vodka. What's that? Clicked on that, went to her page, liked her post, and guess what? I became a fan, because she recognized the name was, this is someone with no money, and yet she has over 5 million fans. Now she's making money. She's actually offering other products and things like that. But she has over 5 million fans by spending zero, all because she figured out a way to grab people's attention enough that they went like, whoa, what's that? Let me check it out.
It's really interesting. And I think those case studies are so fascinating because there's so many different aspects. Because you have something like In-N-Out Burger. So I don't know the quality of their burgers. I hear they're great, but I unfortunately have not had it yet. Maybe one
Mm-hmm.
day. But relatively a similar product to McDonald's, but you have a more intriguing message, which is why they're able to be so successful. And then when you have something like Got Milk, you have the opposite example and the opposite result, interestingly enough, when you have hundreds of $1 million in ad spend and you focus on just selling the product instead of kind of showing what the value is, instead of really balancing that out. So those are really, really interesting case studies, and I appreciate you sharing them. On a similar note, one of the things that I think is really prominent in marketing, and I think you've discussed this a little bit in some of your work, is kind of the difference between the left brain and the right brain. So what is the difference between left and right brain selling?
Well, and it's funny because I was on a podcast on a show for one of the world's top neuroscientists,
Mhm.
okay, NPN Hub. And they had me because as I talk about left brain and right brain, the first thing they say is, no, it's not really left brain, but we call it left brain. It isn't just the left side of the brain, it's the right and the left, but we call it left brain. Okay, left is logic, LL, that's an easy way to remember it.
Got
Right
it.
brain is emotion. But it's the issue of emotion versus logic, and it works this way. You want to do right brain selling. You want to do emotional selling, and the reason you want to do emotional selling is because the emotion part of the brain, and which I'm showing the right, yeah, right brain. Okay, make sure I'm pointing to the right. The emotion side of the brain is also the decision side of the brain.
Mhm.
People don't realize this. If you throw too much logic at somebody, it actually turns off the emotion center of their brain, and it actually makes it harder to sell. I went to school, and in school they taught us, logical selling. You want to, that actually turns out to be the one of the worst. You have to have emotion. In marketing, we always say know, like, and trust. You want the person to know, like, and trust you. That's emotional, by the way. If you can't stand the person, are you going to buy their product? No, probably not. This guy's better hamburgers. They ended up working. Oh, the guy's a jerk. I'm not going to buy from him. I met the guy.
Mhm.
Okay, got it. Know, like, and trust. But you don't want to just depend on know, like, and trust. But that should be part of it. But what you want to do is you want to trigger the emotion parts of the brain, because that's where decision making happens too. It's easier to make decisions. It's easier to get someone to make decisions. Let me give you political examples, okay?
Oh, we love political examples.
Okay, I bet. So here are two political examples, okay? And this is a tool called anchoring, where you're going to take two things that fit together, two things that don't fit together, and you put them together. Let me give you an anchoring major example, and I'll give you the two political examples. So the Vietnam War, after the Vietnam War, tons of people hated war, the whole idea of war. And so Ronald Reagan was launching the missile defense system to sort of shoot down missiles if they're firing towards America back then. But if he started running an ad and he started promoting it and saying we're running the missile defense system, people would have said, they would have stood in line and protested, we don't need anything, missile, go away, okay? But back then, guess what was really popular? It just launched Star Wars.
Oh, wow.
So he decided to call it the Star Wars Missile Defense System. He married two pieces together, and people went, man, yeah, the Star Wars Missile Defense System, yeah. And it took off like gangbusters, and they had almost nobody protesting the Star Wars Missile Defense System because he married the two things together. Now, I'm not saying to do that or not. So let me give you some political examples. That was a political example, but it fascinates me. It fascinates me when I look at some of these things. So I heard this expression: "You can't hug a child with nuclear arms." Okay.
Understood.
Technologically, it doesn't make sense, but you sort of marry two things together. Here's another one. And I am not pro or anti-gun. This is not about that at all. I just love brain glue. Okay. But so here's this thing. The right to bear arms is almost as crazy as the right to arm bears.
That's funny.
Okay. But when you say it, it resonates with people, but it also triggers parts of the brain, and people go like, okay, it's not logical, but interesting,
Got it. So if someone, say, for example, was, supportive of one position or the other, to be able to make it and they're trying to appeal to someone who's, say, for example, undecided, if they could make their stance appeal to someone, there's a bigger chance that that person might join kind of their side or the other.
And that's what you want to do, is you want to find something that people already love, and then anchor your product or idea to that, or something people hate. Let me give you a hate one, okay? How about if you hate Wonder Bread invented sliced bread in the early 20th century, okay? And all bread came in loaves, but Wonder Bread was the first one that actually was sliced bread, but it's bleached also, so it's all white, And so for 10 years, Wonder Bread dominated the bread industry. And then their competitors came up with a phrase, and I'll tell you why they came up with the phrase, because it really worked back then. And they said, they said it to journalists, the whiter your bread, the quicker you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
And they went, what? Almost overnight, Wonder Bread went from dominating the industry to almost being bankrupt. And then they invented, when you start putting vitamins and minerals mixed in your food, okay? They invented that concept because otherwise they were going bankrupt, because people literally overnight, whiter your bread, the quicker you're dead. So we had COVID. They had pellagra back then, and pellagra was you had a greater chance, and you died, like people were dying from COVID. People were dying all over the place. And they recognized that a large part of why you were dying was because you have an absence of vitamin B3. Niacin, if you see niacin, by the way, niacin is high in vitamin B3. So people put niacin in their food, and that's suddenly they have vitamin B3. But Wonder Bread didn't. They bleached the bread, and it killed off, all the vitamins and minerals. And so these guys ran an ad. They talked to journalists, and they said, hey, you realize the whiter your bread, the quicker you're dead? Dead is a trigger word, by the way. I'll talk about trigger words in a second. And they went, what? They said, yeah, let me tell you, it doesn't have B3, and because of that, people are dying from pellagra because they're eating Wonder Bread. Oh, and suddenly you have newspaper articles. The whiter your bread, the quicker you're dead. Yeah. And overnight, people went like, whoa, And trigger words are a good one. I love this. About this kid who dropped out of high school. He borrowed money from his dad, and he came up with one word that helped him become a billionaire. Okay?
I'm listening.
So I'll tell you that in a sec. So let me tell you that in a second, but let me tell you this other one, because I'm going to marry the two stories. So what does billionaire Richard Branson, Madonna, and olive oil have in common?
I hope they all weren't locked together in a room. That's one thing.
It's not virgin.
Okay.
Virgin olive oil.
Got
Madonna's like a virgin, touched for the very first time. Whatever, it's a great song. That's helped her become a blockbuster. And him was Virgin. Okay, Richard Branson. So Richard Branson borrowed money from his dad, and he started a magazine for musicians. okay, to help musicians and to promote them and all that stuff. And then he decided he wanted to start a record company. And he was thinking, like, what's a good name? Why don't I call it Virgin Records? That's going to get people's attention. Like, whoa, what? Virgin Records? And he got groups like the Rolling Stones to be part of it and everything else. I mean, the people started signing up because of Virgin. He went like, Virgin is a trigger word. People really find it cool. He started all these other Virgin companies. I was talking to this person in Texas. I didn't know this because we don't have them in Southern California. But she said, yeah, we have Virgin Hotels.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Yeah, they're owned by Richard Branson. I didn't know that. Of course, we know there's Virgin Airlines and Virgin Galactic. But he started trademarking things because of the word Virgin. It's like um, it's like Eve Ensler
Mm-hmm.
started a play, created a play, and it was on Broadway. It's off Broadway, massively successful, and it's about women's the troubles that women go through. So if she called the play "The Trouble Women Go Through," you think it would have gotten lots of success? Not like what
Probably
she
not.
got. She came up with the name "The Vagina Monologues." The
Interesting.
vagina. There's an HBO series on her Eve Ensler stuff now. Okay, I
Mhm.
mean the vagina. You know, I mean, I'm not saying to do that, but vagina monologues. Does that get more attention than women? What women go through? Absolutely. It's like, what did she just say? So I'm from Canada. I'm originally from Montreal. I lived in Southern California for like 37 years. And when I was a kid in Montreal, there's a city in Canada that really got everybody's attention, kids' attention especially, and it's called Regina, Saskatchewan. Because what does it sound like? Okay,
Sounds like a woman's.
exactly. So we would laugh, Regina, yeah, Regina. You know, like in our families, we probably couldn't say vagina. We'd say Regina. Hey, could you go to
Mhm.
Regina? So the Regina, Saskatchewan came up with an advertising campaign. This is really gutsy, okay, for a city in Canada, for a city anywhere. It virtually tripled their tourism, okay? It's such a good campaign slogan that Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones and Madonna talked to their audiences about, hey, guess what? You want to go visit Regina? Okay. So here's the slogan they came up with. And the slogan was so good, they came up with T-shirts with it. People would have bumper stickers with this. So what would you come up with if you're advertising for Regina, Saskatchewan?
I'll let you answer that. I'll keep
Okay.
my thoughts in my head.
Regina, it rhymes with fun.
That's funny. That's good. That's so creative. You know what's crazy about a lot of these examples that comes up to mind, and not just from some of the stuff that you shared, but some of the stuff that I've seen from people that have been very successful with marketing, this ability to tolerate a lot of risk. I mean, you go against every logical rule and you're basically doing your best to not be politically correct in the name of a successful campaign. And I think what's interesting is a lot of times people are trained, and I think we're almost conditioned to be so logical and so left brain and so just kind of by the rules that the only way to stand out is to try to say something stupid, and we're risking kind of looking like an idiot, but at the same time you almost have to take that risk to really make a successful campaign.
Well, look at the books for dummies.
Mm-hmm.
What are you saying? Hey, if you're a dummy, buy my book. You know, and yet they sell like like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I have this guy David Baer who, with his partner, coach advertise people in advertising. Okay, and so I said, hey, I got the perfect name for you, David. BAER. Okay, it's Bare Naked Advertising. His partner said, wow, it's a fantastic name. And he said, no, I don't want to call it that. I don't want to be Bare Naked Advertising. But his partner is going like, no, that's amazing. That's a great name for us because we're in the core of advertising. We teach you how to make more money in advertising, Bare Naked Advertising. He
Mm-hmm.
hasn't changed the name yet. But it grabs more attention, and it's a very logical name. I forget what it is. I forget what the name of their business is, but if it was Bare Naked Advertising, I'd remember it.
Got it. So interesting, these examples, and I really appreciate you bringing those up. To switch to another example, I know one of the things that kind of you mentioned in the past is why Shark Tank is such a popular show. So, there are a lot of really fun business shows out there, a lot of them that have been on for a few years, but Shark Tank seems to stand head and shoulders above the rest. I think going on 14 or 15 seasons. So, from
Mm-hmm.
your perspective, or someone that's kind of really knows brain glue, why do you think Shark Tank has been able to really stand out from the crowd?
There are two reasons. First is the name Shark Tank.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's actually started in Canada and it has a different name. I forget what it is. I can't even remember the name, but Shark
Dragon's
Tank,
Den. Dragon's Den.
Dragon's Den, right, right, exactly. And Dragon's Den, okay, it's kind of popular in Canada, because they don't have a lot of shows, whatever. But Shark Tank is a much better name.
Hmm.
because it's not a tank full of sharks, by the way. Okay, even though they have the images of, it feels like it if you're on the show. But also, there's a movement that's happening, and it's the what do you call it again? The when people are getting a side hustle.
Hmm.
Okay, people are realizing that I can make a lot more money with a side hustle. When they watch a show like Shark Tank, Shark Tank encourages them because you have people that are they're normal people. Sometimes you look at them and they go, "Hey, I came up with this idea for a toilet stool," squatty potty, and you start laughing. But you also realize, these are individuals who came up with a business thing. It's kind of started as a side hustle. They're just kind of trying to make extra money, but they end up figure out a way to make so much money that they're actually making millions of dollars. I quit my job. Me and my husband or me and my wife quit their jobs just so we could focus on this. We just made $2 million. It's like, whoa, $2 million. And it's encouraging us to recognize, when we go to school, this is not against teachers, but teachers are members of a union. Okay. And so because of that, they're thinking of, we want you to get a good job. Okay. Not we want you to be an entrepreneur. We want you to get a good job. And we'll teach you how to get a good job by sit in your chair, follow the instructions that are being told, learn math, learn English, whatever else it is, and all that stuff so you can get a good job. Not so you can start a business and become successful. I love how many people dropped out of college, and I'm not promoting it, but
It's
Steve
popular.
Jobs and all these guys, and I'll go back to Richard Branson. Richard Branson dropped out of high school because he was an entrepreneur. He had it in his head, and Brain Glue, Shark Tank encourages us to start looking at that and going, gee, I never thought of starting my own business. Wow. Maybe doing a side hustle, maybe selling something on the side. And there's so many opportunities. There's franchises and there's all these other things, but there's so many opportunities that you start realizing, wow, maybe I'm going to try this. Let me try this thing. You start doing this thing. I remember I was selling a pet supplement online, and because I was helping the company grow, and on the side, the owner of the company let me sell a pet supplement online. There's a whole story, so I don't want to talk about that, but um, I so I figured, well, marketing online is easy because I've seen so many classes or so many little
Videos.
videos or webinars on it, whatever else. It's harder than a lot of people think. Okay. And so I hired a coach. I have money, so I hired a coach. I spent like $1,000, and it was terrible. And so, okay, fine. With this within 6 months. And then 6 months after I started trying to sell it, I hired this other coach who was fantastic. And suddenly I started making, I remember calling my wife and saying, "Hey, Pam, American Express just charged our credit card $1,000." And she said, "Well, stop it." I said, "Oh, wait a second. We just made 9,000, 10,000, 11,000. I'll call you right back." And I told her how much money we were making. She said, "Well, spend more." Just wife, what can I say? Spend more. I ended up making over $1 million from this product I was selling online because I figured out the combination of things that you want to do, how you want to sell. And it blew my mind because it actually scared me at first. I went like, am I breaking the law or something? Because it's freaky. I'm working as a consultant. I make this much money, but I'm selling this one product online and I'm making this much money. It's like, this is scary. It's not scary anymore, by the way. Keep that money coming in, okay? But in the beginning, it's like it freaks you out a little bit, or
Doesn't
freaked
seem
me out, and a
natural.
lot of people. That's why I coach the small business administration. A lot of people in the small business administration, because more and more people are realizing, because of shows like Shark Tank, it's actually kind of cool to have a part-time thing, especially if it's something you're passionate about. We have somebody who's really good at translation or something, and so we helped her build her business so she can actually make a lot more money. Things like that. Some people lose their job, or through COVID, we had a lot of people who were doing online stuff. But Shark Tank is very important. It's important for two reasons. One is because of the name, but the second is because it's encouraging to us to
Hmm.
actually go beyond what our life is. My life is that my wife worked for my wife worked at a community college in Canada, okay, in Montreal. And there was this guy, because I've been an entrepreneur for most of my life, and there was this guy who was the head of the maintenance for this whole
Hmm.
university, okay. And then he was retiring after, I don't know, 15 years in business, 15 years or 20 years with the job or whatever else it was. And he was retiring. And a month before he retired, his wife left him. And she said, "I'm leaving you because I realize how boring our life has been. And I'm going like, boring, because I started as an entrepreneur. It's like we struggled to make $1, and he's had all this money coming in from a job for his whole life, and you're leaving because it was boring. But I realized, if life is boring, I saw this guy who had a T-shirt that said "Life sucks and then you die," and I'm like, no, life has to be. You have to have fun, and that's why you start with pick something that you're passionate about. I mean, Daniel, you're passionate about the podcast. You're passionate about the other things you do, but I know you are. And it comes across. And I think that's why people are hooked to your podcast, because they know that you're passionate about this and you care about the audience, but you're passionate about sharing something that's going to be valuable for them. And so, Squatty Potty, when they came up with the idea, they didn't come up with the idea and say, okay, let's pick something. Let's pick paper. Let's sell paper. No, they said, let's wait until we find something we're passionate about. And they said, well, this stool, I'm passionate about this. This changed my life. It can change other people's lives too. This is going to be fun. And they had passion about this. And when they had passion, and we see that on Shark Tank, somebody comes on, they have what looks like a crappy product, but they're passionate about it. And the investors say, okay, yeah, we're going to do it. Not always, but often. And it encourages us to recognize, I know logic is I have a job and I make so much money a week and everything else. That's the logic part of it. But the emotion part is, I'm a musician. I love playing music. I have this guy who was the CEO of 2 banks over his life, and the CEO of a tech company. Okay, and then his wife was dying, and so for 5 years he dropped out of everything, and he stayed with his wife, and then she just passed away. She passed away about 8 months ago, and then so I was coaching him. I was helping him so he can get back into business and get going. But one of the things that came out of this was it's when you look at him, you go like, really? He's a musician. He plays guitar and he sings, and he loves to do that in clubs. He would even do it for free. And so it got him to start doing it again. And he said, no, this has changed my life. I love doing this, and I have to do this. You think the CEO of a bank likes to play music in a club on the weekends? Really? But he does. It's passion. It's inside us. And we have such an opportunity. If you say life is boring, then you're living the wrong life. Things are going to happen, not some good things, some bad things. But if you have passion, then life is worth it. Life is worth it. And it's so easy because just what do you love? What movies do you love? What hobbies do you love? Things like that. And I think that's where Shark Tank is valuable, because also you are valuable for your audiences. Hopefully I am too. But because what you're doing is you're promoting to people is like, if you're passionate about something, you could actually make a living and change your life. You can make more of a living. If you have a product that you're really passionate about, but you got logical ads, that's what I say. Let's make them emotional ads, and then you'll get people going like, "Whoa, really?" And then you'll make more money while you have more fun. The hardest thing for me is if somebody started as an entrepreneur and they have to quit and look for a job because they can't make enough money. And you and I are both focusing on, no, there are lots of ways. We'll show you how to do this, and so you can actually make a ton of money while you're having fun. And then one of my favorite movies of all time was Pay It Forward. That's why I do so much work with the Small Business Administration is, if you have success, you want to pay it forward and turn other people on. Don't pay, the payback. Thank them, but pay it forward. It's like somebody helped you, you help other people, and motivate them and recognize that like life can be fun. That's what we're selling, really, isn't it?
For sure. I think that was probably the best "Why does Shark Tank such a great show" answer I've ever heard. Like that answer in itself should be in the Hall of Fame. So I really
Well,
appreciate you sharing that, James. But really interesting
thank
how
you,
a lot of
Dan.
times things that are intriguing and emotional and really get us to pursue the things that we love are the things that we're drawn to. So I thought that was really fascinating. To switch gears a bit on a little bit more of a personal note, you have been fortunate enough to work with a lot of really cool and awesome individuals, but one of which is this big financial tycoon, which we all know and love, and I hope he lives many more years, and you probably know who I'm talking about. But if you could just touch upon what's your relationship like with Warren Buffett?
Warren Buffett, he's an investor. But after a while, he realized there was actually a friend of his who was the head of Geico Insurance. And he said to him, you make a lot more money and you'll have a lot more fun if you can actually buy companies completely instead of just
Investing.
instead of just investing in companies. I mean, he invests in stuff he loves. He loves Coca-Cola, so he invested in them, things like that. For a long time, he stayed away from tech companies because he wasn't into them. But he elect Gillette, he invested in because he used it. Okay. But Geico is one of the first businesses he bought, where he bought Geico, and he started realizing how much fun he could. He owns See's Candy, because these are products he loves. So he says, "Hey, I'm going to buy the company, okay? But I can make a lot more money, and of course I can invest because I've got lots of money to invest." And Geico has become a blockbuster for him as far as financial is concerned. But he realized I could buy companies and have a lot more fun with it. So he started wanting to buy finance companies and banks, and he bought a bank in Pasadena, California, called the Mutual Savings Bank of Pasadena. And I ran a behavioral management firm. I started as a photographer. Actually, I have a mechanical engineering background, but I dropped out of school with that, and I went to because people didn't realize it isn't just math. I love art. I love psychology. I was fascinated by that. I had them as electives in college, and suddenly it turned me on to like, whoa! I was a really bad boy because They said, okay, you've used up all your electives, so I would sign up for regular classes in math and whatever else in engineering, and then at course change I would show up and I would change them to psychology and art.
Funny.
And eventually, after 3 years, they realized what I was doing and said, "No, you can't do that anymore." So anyway, well, that's the whole side of the story. But I started in as a photographer. I was an advertising photographer, very successful. I apprenticed with some really famous people, but then I learned advertising so I could do a better job in photography. Eventually, I started an advertising agency. I actually had people I work for advertising agencies that said, "Geez, you know so much. We want to bring you in on our, when we're brainstorming what to do with some of our clients." So I learned advertising. Eventually, I learned that marketing is the boss of advertising because advertising is how to communicate, but marketing is what do we want to communicate and what kind of results do we have. That's why the whole idea of Got Milk is so valuable for me because that's, they're trying to sell more milk. It was a nice campaign, but they didn't sell more milk. Okay. Then I learned that behavioral management is the top of that. How do you actually change behavior? And I realized that that's what we want in marketing is, change behavior. You hate this, but we're going to get you to buy it. You love, the whiter your bread, the quicker you're dead. We want to kill I'm not saying to do that, but anyway. But so when he bought Mutual Savings Bank of Pasadena, he recognized that all the top managers hated selling. Now, I didn't just focus on selling because I focused on operations and helping managers and things like that, and people who have closed door policy, and we would teach them how to have an open door policy and stuff like that. A lot of things like that in companies. But with Mutual Savings Bank of Pasadena, they wanted to make all the top managers salespeople, not change the title, but teach them sales. And they needed to change the behavior because they hated selling. A lot of managers, they became a manager because they hated selling. So I can be a manager and I oversee, if anybody's going to go out there and sell. And so I have a program. It was I think it's a 12-week program. So it's 2 hours a week for 12 weeks. And so I would get people to tackle stuff outside their comfort zone. And that's why they brought me in. And they went from hating selling to loving selling. And, they loved it so much. They were like sharing with friends and family and all this stuff because they went, this is actually fun because I showed them some of the essence of selling. And there are a lot of things like if somebody who's selling, I always do past, present, future. We were selling we're an advertising agency, okay, at the time. So we would say, I was a behavioral management firm at that time with Warren Buffett. But that's what he wants. When you take over a company, you want to change the behaviors of people. Because if you could slightly change the behavior so they're able to tackle something outside their comfort zone, sales will explode. Okay? And so that's what our behavioral management firm, I discovered this. We got to experiment with clients because clients weren't doing homework assignments, okay? And so I came up with this process, and the process became the tail wagging the dog. The process was so powerful that we actually didn't need the training program that was in the middle. We just used this process. But yeah, just when you change, we all live in a comfort zone, whether we realize it or not. But if you do what you've always done, you get what you always got. So you have to tackle something a little different than what you've always done. And that's scary to a degree, okay, depending on how much it is. And so what we would do is we train people in a safe environment to tackle stuff slightly out of their comfort zone, and suddenly sales would explode. So we would say, hey, I had this guy, him and his brother, who owned a trucking company, and they had like 50 trucks. They worked their way up. They bought 2 trucks and 3 trucks and everything else. They had 50 trucks. And they wanted to grow their business. So they brought us in initially because they wanted to, just teach everybody how to be more productive. But when he realized how powerful the program was, he said, can I change what I want to do? And I said, yeah, you can change it once, but you can't change it like every week, because otherwise we'll never get anything done. He said, no, we'll change it once. What do you want to do? He said, I want to start buying competitors. I've never done that before, and I'm terrified. I've never actually done that before. We have a friend who's got a trucking company with like 30 trucks. He's an older guy. His kids don't want his business. They don't want to go into the trucking business, but they want to enjoy daddy's money.
Yep.
And he's like, he'd love to sell his business, but we've never actually bought a business, so we don't know what we have to do. So I said, okay, yeah, we'll make that the thing, because they recognize you're going to get us tackling something a little out of the comfort zone. So here's one of the most important things that I learned about people, a lot of people, okay? A lot of people, particularly senior managers, are terrified of saying, I don't know, or I don't know how. But if we're getting you to tackle something outside your comfort zone, you can't know it. So don't BS us, guys, and don't BS yourself by saying, oh, I know how to do this, I know how to do that. You've never, if you do, you don't need us. We're going to get you to tackle something outside your comfort zone. So they had an in-house accountant, a CPA, okay? And so we had like these 7-day goals that he had to do. And he was supposed to go into the competitor and evaluate the competitor's business. But the first week, at the end of the week, we had our session, and he said, I wasn't able to do it because we're too busy, which is common BS, okay? So that's fine, okay. So we're going to do it this week, okay? You're going to do it. He came back and he said, I wasn't able to do it. And he finally admitted, because the reason I didn't go out and do it is because I've never actually evaluated a business before to be acquired, and I'm terrified of it.
Huh.
And I'm afraid that if I do mess up, then we'll buy this business and it's going to bankrupt all the company. And so he said, oh, well, that's because we want you to say, I don't know, or I don't know how. It's okay to say that. And then so he said, do you guys ever work with attorneys? Oh, yeah, we've got 2 attorneys that we work with all the time. Let's talk to them and find out if they know an accountant who's actually done acquisitions. We did. They found one, and that person ended up becoming the mentor for this person. But so by getting people to tackle something outside their comfort zone, it became really powerful. And I'll go back to bare naked advertising. He's very logical. Bare naked advertising is like, what a name, He laughed. I said, do you remember it? And his partner was like, come on, David, we got to do this, He says, no, I don't like it. It's because it's outside his comfort zone. And so we have to understand that, coming up with the name Squatty Potty, for a lot of people, that'll be a little, or the lawnmower. That's a little out of your comfort zone, The book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. His book used to be called Men, Women, and Relationships. And people said it's the most fabulous book on relationships I've ever gone through. It's helped me strengthen my relationship. But almost nobody was buying the book. Then he got this crazy idea. What if I change the title to Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus? And then tweak the content just a little, so I refer to it throughout the book. What do you think happened? Almost overnight, he sold 500,000 copies, then 1 million, then 2 million. I say in my book he sold 10 million copies, because I did research and everything else. And I know Steve Harrison, who helps him with marketing, or who helped him with marketing, John Gray, who wrote the book. And he said, no, you're wrong. I said, Steve, I did the work. He said, I did the research. John was telling me. He said, no. We're over 50 million books sold now. He went from 20,000 to 50 million, all because he changed the title. And that's one of the first things where I realized, like, whoa, just because he changed the title? He has the same book. It's basically, you put the 2 books together and you flip page by page. They're almost the same book. But he changed the title, and suddenly he sold 50 million copies. And that got me focusing on, whoa, the title, or how we describe the book, or how we describe the business we're in, can explode sales beyond what we ever expected. And it's subtle. We think it's subtle because, we think we're going to say something and people go, whoa, that's amazing. No, that's not how it works. It's just a subtle trigger in the brain, I remember I was in a store. I talked about the flames coming out of the window. I was in a Barnes and Noble, and I'm looking at books, book. Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Book. What? Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. What the heck's that? I picked that up. The first step to getting in to buy it is to pick it up. Okay, if it was online, I would have gone, done it that way. But I started looking through the book and went, oh, this is really good. Let me get this. And I bought the book. And that's how most people bought the book, because it stopped flames coming out of the book. Okay. It got your attention first and then you stop. And so, yeah, it's just, I mean, it works online as well as offline with, mommy needs vodka, mommy, I mean, it's just, it seems subtle until you realize that you start making a fortune by, Virgin Airlines, Virgin Records. Now, the word virgin was all he needed to suddenly have blockbusters. I mean, like, whoever thinks of that? I think of the word dirty. Okay. How many, would you name your product Dirty? How about if you had a movie, would you call it Dirty Dancing? How about Dirty Harry? Okay. I mean, these are blockbusters with the name Dirty. If they were called Cool Dancing or Fun Dancing, you think it would be as successful as Dirty Dancing? I don't think so. Yeah, it's and when you realize it's a subtle thing that you want, this little trigger in the emotion side of the brain, and that's what brain glue focuses on. That's why people love it, because they say it's easy. Because I pick each one of the triggers, I separate them. I don't. Now I'm throwing them at you because there's so many different ones. I want to give different examples, but I take them one at a time, and you go through it, and people realize, like, wow, this is so much fun. Bare naked. So I have trigger words. You go through the trigger words, and it gives you all these trigger words. Gives you some examples of that, and then gives you an exercise. Put naked. So okay, so bare naked advertising. Oh, that's cool. This is the number one thing that people get out of the book. Okay, I have to say this. Okay. I didn't invent brain glue. I invented the term brain glue, but I didn't invent brain glue. It's been around forever.
Mm-hmm.
When you read the book, when people read the book, you start recognizing, whoa, that's why they're successful, because it uses this tool. It uses alliteration, a repetition of sound, or it uses this or that. And that's why I never even realized. You start recognizing, you start seeing it all over the place, where you start realizing. I mean, I was doing a story on, what's it called? Rocky Road ice cream.
Yep.
Rocky Road ice cream uses 3 tools. Okay. The first one is when you open up Rocky Road ice cream, it has rocks inside it. Did you know that? No, it doesn't. It's chocolate ice cream with nuts and marshmallows. It was invented, but during the Great Depression. Okay. And back then, the only ice creams were chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla. Okay, those are the 3 ice creams, and they mixed it. They put nuts and marshmallows with chocolate, and people went, "Whoa, it's really cool!" But it's bumpy like a rocky road. Okay, so that's a metaphor. It's like a rocky road. Okay, the second term it uses is alliteration, the repetition of sound. Rocky road, like Marilyn Monroe. There's a whole story on that. Okay, her name was not Marilyn Monroe; it was Norma Jean Mortensen. Okay, and her. But anyway, so alliteration. When I realized alliteration, I started realizing Coca-Cola, Best Buy, PayPal, TikTok. If TikTok was called the Chinese social media platform, you think it would be as successful as TikTok?
Well,
I talked to my youngest daughter and I said, you realize that TikTok is a Chinese social media platform. She goes, no, it isn't. It's not Chinese. I said, no, it is. She had to do some research. Anyway, so they use metaphor, which is rocky road. They use alliteration, repetition of sound, rocky road. And then the third thing they use is humor.
Mm-hmm.
During the Great Depression was called "We're All on a Rocky Road." So the way they promoted it was they said, "We're on a rocky road anyway. We might as well have Rocky Road ice cream."
Mm-hmm.
So people kind of laugh as they're going, "Hey, that's pretty cool," And so just like the lawnmower, laughers can be buyers.
Wow.
So, but when I realized those things all fit together, you can use one of them or you can use multi of them. Then it becomes like really powerful, and people realize like, wow, we can actually, I get people all the time, like you were asking, like, how do I rename my product or whatever else? And it's actually pretty easy. Yours is great because it goes with your name, Blumin, so it's awesome. But it's just, and you can have lots of fun with Blumin, like the like the coffee beans that you were talking about. I mean, you can just have a riot with that.
Yep.
But just when you start to understand it, when you start to see it other places, you start to recognize that they figured this out, and I'm going to do it also. Because I want to make this little trigger go off people's brains so that they start buying my product or accepting my idea. And when you do that, it works. And I've been doing this for years now. So, but in the beginning, it was like, wow, this worked better than I thought. Well, let's try it with that. Whoa, this worked. I had these construction guys, and they had after 10 years, they had $2 million of sales. Ha ha ha! In 1 year, I took them to 10 million, and they reached 32 million 2 years later just by applying brain glue. I mean, it works so well. It's scary sometimes how well it works.
Have you kind of from all the stories that you've shared, I think I've kind of picked up a theme here about a certain kind of behavior that we have when we see things. So, I like from a high level, what have you noticed about human behavior kind of that comes when a lot of these companies make these really small, subtle pivots?
Passion. It comes back to what Zig Ziglar taught me is selling is nothing more than a transference of passion. I mean, when we're advertising, we don't have, if I'm face to face with a person, people would say we have ads with you and all that stuff, but can we have video of you? And I'm like, why? It's because you're passionate. I mean, you can't see your passion in the ads, but we can make them funny sometimes. I'll go like, oh, like, hey, what did he say? So, have funny expressions and things like that. But yeah, selling is transference of passion. And I benefited totally from, when Zig Ziglar said that, I realized, okay, am I passionate? I was in advertising, I was in photography first. Am I passionate about what I do? Yeah. I did an ad early on in my career for Avon Cosmetics. Later on, I won them as a client, but I was working with a big studio, and I did an ad for a photograph for Avon Cosmetics. And I thought, I hope they like this. I tried to make an ad that they liked, and they came and looked at it and said, no, we don't like that. And I realized, oh wow, they didn't like it. And I realized, well, I didn't really like it either. I was just trying to create something that I thought they liked. And I realized I need to create something that I love. And then at least one of us is going to love it. We know one person loves it. And when I started creating ads that I love, suddenly clients loved it and audiences loved it. And I realized that I'm doing this all wrong. I'm trying to be logical. Logically, it's it's a bottle of perfume, and that's. And I said, no, we gotta want somebody smelling and going, oh, wow, and I can create ads like that's fun. What creates passion if somebody's buying Avon Cosmetics? And I
Mhm.
started creating ads that they didn't even ask for, and he went, "Oh, that's awesome. We got to put it in our catalog. And can we get you doing the catalog? Yeah, sure. And
So,
suddenly it became fun, and it was just, it's just transference of passion. I mean, it's
so
just to me that's the backbone of why what we want to enjoy in life.
So, say for example, we're all these logical beings, which I want to say hypothetically, but the way society runs and the way you've probably observed is we all try to at least be logical. But if someone wants to really practice their creative capability or practice, learning brain glue, what are some simple steps that someone can do to learn how to
We
utilize
can buy
that?
the book, but you want to understand passion. You want to connect yourself to passion. I do this all the time. I say, if you have testimonials, you want to print them out and put them on the wall right next to where your computer is, where you work every day. If you work there,
Hmm.
you want to, if there's something you're passionate about. I've got ads here. I've got a woman. You can't see it, but she's grabbing this guy's face like this. Because
Hmm.
I did a book called Secret Life of Fathers, and I was talking about the father-daughter project. This is our men brain damage. I love the ad. It was fun, because I was on an interview, and this woman said, "Yeah, you're telling us how men are brain damaged." You
Hmm.
know, I said, "Okay, yeah, all us men are brain damaged, and that's why we need to, have better relationships with daughters if you have them." Anyway, but the point is, you want to surround your. So here's how I became successful in advertising. Okay, somebody told me this. He said, take a wall and every time you create an ad or a photograph, you want to no. Every time you see an ad or a photograph that you absolutely love, put it on the wall and fill that wall. And every day you want to look at that wall. And eventually, what's going to happen is you're going to start doing ads and photographs, and you're going to want to put those on the wall too. You're not going to put every one of them, but you're going to say, "Oh, I love this one." You're going to put it on the wall too. And slowly but surely, you'll start putting more and more of your work on the wall. What's happening is it's teaching you what is emotionally powerful.
Hmm.
And so I did brain glue. I had an opportunity to win the anti-drug campaign in America because I won, and I'm in Montreal, major clients like Kraft Foods, Timex watches, and all that stuff, Avon Cosmetics. And I had the opportunity to win the anti-drug campaign with powerful, logical reasons why you should not do drugs. Logic.
Hmm.
Okay. And I lost to the guy that created the ad that went, it's a guy holding an egg saying, "This is your brain," and cracking the shell and dropping the egg into a sizzling frying pan. "This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?" When I saw that, it scared the hell out of me because this is infinitely more powerful than my ad, even though I'm giving you logical reasons. But this is like an egg sizzling in a frying pan that says, "There's your brain,
Hmm.
sizzling on drugs." And it was so powerful that I realized you don't learn that nobody they don't teach it in school. They don't teach emotional selling in school, but this was emotional selling. So I created a passion box right next to my computer. I put a box, and every time I saw something that's passionate, or every time I heard a phrase that was passionate, I would put it in the box in the hopes that eventually I'd figured out how brain glue works. And it was after I met John Gray and I saw that he went from 20,000 to 50 million books sold, that I was going to put the book in the box, in the passion box. And I said, no, wait a second. This is a metaphor. Is that the secret? And I went through it and I found that metaphor is one of 14 brain triggers. But it's just, you, that's what changed me. And you want to surround yourself with that because you want to be emotional. If people sit at the computer, I tell them a joke and they see me show up and they throw the joke back at me, and you can see their body language changes. Well, you want to surround yourself with stuff that motivates you. When you surround yourself with, we want a white wall and all that stuff or whatever a colored wall is, but no, you want to surround yourself with, you've got like a basketball shirt behind you or something like that. That's cool. It motivates you because it reminds me of something that's really fun. And you want to keep yourself motivated and then motivate the people that you work with. And by doing that, everything changes. That's, to me, that's the most important thing. I can teach you brain glue till the cows come home, but if you don't get that it's all about passion, what makes you passionate, you know, then you're going to miss the point. And just last thing on this. So we moved to Los Angeles and we named our middle daughter Lauren Asia, L.A. because as soon as she was born, we moved to Los Angeles, and so I named her Lauren Asia, AJA, and it was from Steely Dan. We love Steely Dan. It was a Steely Dan album, Asia, AJA, and they had a song Asia. So 2 years ago, she says, "Dad, I love the name Asia." She lives in Montana, and she's really successful. But she says, "I love the name Asia, AJA, but where'd you ever come up with that?" And I said, "Well, from the Steely Dan album, Asia." So she ended up in the song. So she called me back in about an hour and she said, "I listened to the song. I hate that song." I'm like, "I'm sorry." She likes it now. She says it takes a while listening to it. I said, "But I was passionate about it and I was passionate about you. And so I gave you the name Asia because I thought, I love Steely Dan, their creativity and how many people wanted to work with them and all that stuff and musicians and stuff. And so because of that, I love the fact that you're named Asia. And so, but when you start doing it that way and recognize how can we plug passion into all the different parts of our life becomes more fun.
For sure. And what I think, what I just thought of when you're mentioning all that, I think that, a lot of times you probably see on LinkedIn, people are posting job advice every day or certain advice. I think maybe something that would streamline the whole interview process when companies are looking to hire, just straight up ask someone, are you passionate about this kind of work? Instead of asking them 17 different questions that may or may not apply to what they're actually doing. So it's always incredible how just these simple approaches can fix a lot of things for sure.
Well, and so I have past, present, future when I'm doing salespeople, and I say, when we were selling our advertising agency, we would say, "Have you ever worked with an agency before, past, present, or future?" And I don't care if they say yes or no. We did our advertising ourselves. I say, "Well, what worked for you and what didn't work for you?" And it's a way to trigger out some of the passion. He said, "Well, this worked, but I think we didn't understand all the different areas that we could have focused on." I said, "Okay, then are you working with one now or are you doing it yourself?" Whatever they say, we say, "Well, what's working for you now? What's not working for you now?" And it sort of brings out the passion. Then we say, if you had the ideal opportunity to work with the most incredible agency you ever worked with, what would it be like? Tell us emotionally, what would you guys be doing? And by doing past, present, future, it's an easy way to work with them from an emotional standpoint. So you get them to recognize, I hated the ad we did. I had a client that said that. I said, "Really? What was it?" Seagram's. And he showed me the ad. I said, "Oh, that's stupid. Why'd they do that?" I said, I have no idea. So, "Well, tell me what you love." I said, "Well, we spend $50,000 to $100,000 on product design and bottle design because the bottles are very important when we're selling a Seagram's liquor, okay? And these guys don't understand how important the bottle and the label is that, it's got to be so good that we want to make it like pop off the page." Oh, and then I said, "Well, I have samples. Let me show you some samples we had." I showed him one sample, and he said, "Well, I'm so mad that I never knew that you guys existed. We got to work with you guys to do our ads for us in certain types of ads we had." But
So
it's just, again, it's tapping the passion. If you can tap the passion in the person you're talking to, or through advertising, tap the passion through the ads or the words you use, life changes.
certainly. And you certainly show no lack of passion, James. So I have to commend you on everything that you've been able to do. So
Thank you.
on that note, I wanted to ask you on a bit of a parting note here, looking towards the future. I'm sure you hear this word, especially living in LA. Well, I guess probably more in San Francisco they talk about this, but I'm sure in LA as well, the rise of AI, the rise of artificial intelligence. A bit of a two-part question here. Do you think AI is going to make this kind of selling or advertising easier or complicated? And if easier, how can we really use it to enhance our selling capabilities?
So here's the one of the biggest problems, if not the biggest problem, with being an entrepreneur: loneliness.
Yep, I can relate to
Okay.
that,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
exactly. And so AI is fantastic because you get a chance to brainstorm, bounce ideas off it, and it bounces ideas back on you. Now, it's not that great. So I said, I have two phrases. I now have three because the third one came from AI. Okay. For how do I talk about brain glue? So switch your pitch if you want to get rich. That was the
Switch your
first one
pitch
I
if
had.
you want to get. That's funny.
Okay. And the second one I finally came up with was, brain glue shows you how to light the fire of desire in your buyer.
Hmm.
So I was working with AI, Chat GPT, and I was trying to figure out, so I said, I gave him some examples of how brain glue works and all that stuff. I said, what's a fun phrase? And I had to go through 100 phrases before I finally got one good one. And it was, why brain glue? Because plain glue doesn't stick to the brain. I thought that was cool. Okay.
Funny.
But it took 100. I had to go through 100 crappy ones before I got to the good one. So, but brain glue helps us as entrepreneurs because often, if you don't get people, if you have people to bounce ideas off, that's always fun. But with brain glue, with the Chat GPT or AI, at least you get to bounce ideas off it. Don't,
Mhm.
I see if you don't fine tune, if you just depend on AI, you probably won't be that successful because the bottom line is AI is still not as passionate as you are about
Mhm.
what your product or service is,
Got it.
but it gives you ideas.
So to collaborate with it instead of just relying on it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a tool. It's like, it's like the internet is a tool.
Mhm.
People said, internet, just talk to friends. I remember, what's his name? Anyway, famous author, and they wanted to sell him stock in a phone company. He said, why do I need a phone to talk to my friend when I can just walk to the neighbor and talk to him?
Mhm.
You know, he didn't understand it. No, you don't understand. So AI is a tool. If we think of it as a collaborative tool that we can bounce ideas off, then it can be tremendously valuable. But you still have to choose this thing that makes the most sense to you from a logical standpoint, but also from a passionate standpoint.
Definitely. I think that's a great way to use AI, especially when you're trying to simplify your advertising and simplify your messaging. And on that note, James, it's been an absolute blast, and I appreciate you sharing a lot of this valuable knowledge. And I personally learned a lot. I think, listeners will definitely learn a lot about how to really use brain glue and how to simplify their messaging. And I definitely encourage them to take a look at your book. And I've been fortunate enough to read some of the sample of it. Really interesting stuff. And overall, thanks again for coming on. It's been a blast.
Oh, Daniel, thank you so much. And yeah, the book's available on Amazon if people want to check it out, Brain Glue. But yeah, Daniel, thank you so much for having me. I love your podcast. So this was fun to be on it.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with James Bond. If you enjoyed the episode, rate the show on Spotify, drop a comment on YouTube, and subscribe.